Well, with the Home Minister under fire again, is the opposition right in demanding his resignation in the 2G case? That's our first big debate tonight. Do let us know what you think. We have the spokesperson of the Congress party, Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, with us tonight. From the BJP, we have MP Smriti Irani joining us, and we have Shoma Chaudhary of Tehelka, the managing editor of Tehelka, with us. We'll also be joined shortly by Dr. Subramanian Swamy and leading lawyer Harish Salve. Let me ask Smriti Irani first that, Smriti, is this the right time really for the BJP to be demanding Mr. Chidambaram's resignation when there really isn't anything that's been proved against him in a court of law? Is it fair to ask him to step down?
I think that extremely interesting that someone seems to have forgotten the memo-gate which has happened within this government, where a note from within the government clearly indicted Mr. Chidambaram's role, stating that the finance minister then, Sri Chidambaram, could have stopped this loot of the Indian treasury if he so desired. There have been questions time and again about his role in the 2G spectrum scam, and a government which declares its commitment to a corruption-free India is a government today that is defending a minister whose name is doing the rounds in a 2G spectrum scam.
But should
so I'm wondering why...
should resignations be demanded because someone's name is doing the rounds, or because something is actually proved against them based on hard evidence in court? Even the Supreme Court is looking at his case. They're looking at whether there should be a CBI probe into his role. Yes.
I spoke of the memo gate for which there's been no response. I'm in fact today pleading to you why only bring up the issue of Mr. Chidambaram. There is a FIR which has been filed against Mr. Krishna. Why isn't that an issue tonight? As to how a serving minister is now accused in yet another case, in yet another scam. So why is it that the opposition is questioned as to why are we demanding the resignation? In fact, the question tonight should be, why isn't the government asking such ministers to step down?
Dr. Abhishek Singhvi, would you like to take that on, that this is an issue of moral responsibility? And as Smriti Irani says today for the BJP, it's not only about Mr. Chidambaram, but it extends to Mr. Krishna as well, because there's an FIR against him. And in the past, in a sense, you set a precedent. I mean, there was nothing proved against Shashi Tharoor. You asked him to go. There was no charge sheet against him. There was nothing really proved against him. So has the Congress, in a sense, already set a standard?
Nidhi, I hope you'll give me a couple of minutes to answer. I think it's going to be a sad day for governance, for Parliament, for a variety of reasons, if we start taking such stances. First of all, it is tragic, regrettable to the extreme, that the BJP has reduced Parliament from a debating and a legislative forum to an agitational forum. Now, I can understand anything under the sun being discussed, voted upon or not voted upon, but to every day put a precondition saying we will not allow this to happen unless this happens is not what Parliament was created for. It cuts at the very root of parliamentary democracy. Number two, it is ridiculous to suggest that when the Supreme Court order is reserved and when a lower court has passed an order which is preliminary order to a further preliminary order, namely asking Subramanian Swamy to come into a box, and in case Subramanian Swamy finds anything worthwhile coming out of his evidence, then possibly two bureaucrats will be called, remember. On that, to ask for the resignation of P. Chidambaram is absolutely hypocritical, double standard. Do they want India to come to a standstill? Do they want that every time I make any comment about you, you should start resigning? There has to be a sense of balance. It's not the first time that we've had opposition politics, but opposition politics also has some bounds of responsibility.
Okay.
Third, let me go further. Even in cases, and there is no such case, even in cases where proper FIRs are filed, if anybody knows the law a little bit, the FIR is merely an information. It has to have some credence by a further filter. It's not that the whole government is to be destabilized and unstabilized by trigger-happy complainants, and the moment a complaint is printed, moment a person approaches the court, before the court does anything, mere information is filed and a copy given, the whole ministries to start resigning.
Okay.
I mean, do we have any concern and responsibility for the good of the average citizen and the cost of the instability that generates?
Okay, Smriti, you wanted to respond before I come to the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I just respectfully, I would like to ask Mr. Singhvi that when he speaks of hypocrisy, especially in parliamentary procedures, Parliament is not meant to be a mute spectator to ministers who indulge in corruption and indulge in scams, and one is to sit there and wait for that minister which is continuously defended, and I'm here talking about Mr. Raja, who was continuously defended by the same government, and the same government gave Mr. Raja a clean chit till evidence that BJP spoke about time and again came in front of the entire country. Now, speaking of hypocrisy and not wanting to demand resignations of people who are in the dock regarding cases which are being fought in the Supreme Court, I would like to ask the Congress very humbly, why have they victimized the Gujarat government over years and demanded, and done everything possible to destabilize the state government there, when cases which have not involved FIRs, which have not been filed against the government or for that matter the Chief Minister, is something that even a esteemed parliamentarian like Mr. Singhvi would not comment on. So why have two sets of standards for the BJP and the Congress party?
We have Dr. Subramanian Swamy, who is the man at the center of it all, joining us in the studio as well. Dr. Swamy, the Law Minister today says that there is nothing in today's court order that the government has to answer for or that Mr. Chidambaram has to answer for. Now, at the end of the day, you've been asked to come and explain why you think these government officials should be called and to testify against Mr. Chidambaram. So is it such a momentous event that has taken place today?
Well, you see, it's not just simply that I've been asked to come. In fact, it is I who wanted to come and say, and I wanted two more witnesses also to be called. I am both an advocate for myself and also a complainant. As an advocate, I produced almost 200 pages of documents, some of which were given to me by the CBI on direction of the court, where it clearly shows that whatever Mr. Raja has been accused of, there is documentation to show, at least prima facie, if not conclusively, that Mr. Chidambaram was an equal partner in that, because he was authorized to do it. The Prime Minister himself went on the floor of Parliament on 24th of February to say that I had no say in the matter because Mr. Chidambaram and Raja were authorized to determine the spectrum price, and they came and informed me. And that is there in letters also, which Mr. Chidambaram has written, which I have produced in court. Having seen this, the order says, having carefully assessed the documents produced by Mr. Swamy, I am allowing his application to get on the witness box and make an argument.
But only partially.
No, because they said that after hearing me, they will decide whether it is necessary to call these people or not.
Exactly.
It's possible.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, precisely. There may not be necessity, because I am calling these two people, as I mentioned in my application, for verification of certain documents. If the court is convinced that these documents don't need verification, they won't call them.
Sure.
Nidhi, I feel, in the increasingly kind of...
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Dr. Singh. One second.
In the increasingly noisy politics that, we are faced with today, I think we need to make a small distinction. We're repeatedly speaking of Mr. Chidambaram, Smriti did that in the context of corruption. I think there are two issues here, and we must put that clearly back on the table. There is a discussion about policy failure, disagreement over policy, and there is an actual act of corruption which involved Mr. Raja and Swan and Unitech, So far, there's no trail to show that Mr. Chidambaram was involved in the corruption, which was the kickbacks or, the preferential treatment of any one or two private parties. What there is a lot of speculation about and a bad optics and paper trail on is on the policy decision, So I feel that one distinction we do owe the courtesy of making between policy failure and corruption.
Is it premature to demand his
policy decision? This is another Congress trick, you see, to talk about policy decision. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about Mr. Singhvi, who constantly talks about policy decision. The fact is the Supreme Court has said many times that policy cannot be arbitrarily determined, even if it's a policy decision. The real question is whether, if you have charged Mr. Raja for fixing the price at 2001 price, did he do it alone or did he do it in jointly with Chidambaram or not?
Okay, Dr. Singhvi, you wanted to respond.
Can I, allow me to make 2 or 3 points. First of all, Dr. Swamy has a problem. What he's accusing me of, I never even opened my mouth here and said so. Unfortunately for him, Ms. Shoma Anand, whom he can't accuse of being a congressman, said so. Because she's made only a fair distinction in a moderate voice. This is what the... Number two, I of course have earlier deprecated, and I repeat that, I completely deprecate the fact that Mr. Dr. Swamy, who has full right as a citizen of India to prove anything in a court of law, goes to courts of law, Supreme Court down to the lowest court, fights his cases, and before a verdict comes, passes a verdict in his favor by himself on the television camera. He's not entitled to do that. Third and most important, we are discussing a very simple, narrow issue. Mr. Chidambaram should resign or not on the basis either of the court order passed today or on attendant circumstances prevalent today. Mr. Dr. Swamy has the absolute full right, and good luck to him for his perseverance and his persistence if he gets something eventually from the Supreme Court or the lower court. Till such time, I repeat what I said earlier, there is not an iota, not a drop of material judicially sanctified in any which way, indirectly, remotely, directly or directly, which warrants anything called a resignation of Mr. Chidambaram. Nothing.
Well, let me then get to a larger question here.
You cannot have governance.
Sure.
And there's no point going all over the place and discussing, one second,
yeah,
going all over the place and discussing Mr. Modi or BJP or history or Krishna. We are discussing a narrow issue, Dr. Swamy's prosecution of Mr. Chidambaram and the order passed today.
No, but
yes,
there is a larger issue as well. On what basis, Shoma, on what basis should ministers be resigning from government? Should it be based on complaints made against them, allegations made against them, FIRs filed against them?
Moral responsibility.
Where does moral responsibility start?
Well,
anyone can file a complaint against anyone.
Mr. Lal Bahadur Shastri resigned for
Mr. Swamy, if I may just finish. I did not finish speaking earlier as well, where I feel that I think given the amount of concern there is over the policy decisions that were made, and the fact that there is a paper trail to show that Mr. Chidambaram was himself concerned about the policy and then conceded to it, I think a statement from him is very much due to the country and to the nation to explain his rationale for why he took the decisions that he took. Having said that, on the larger question of, whether we want ministers to be resigning all the time rather than holding their ground and explaining, giving speaking orders for why they take the decisions they do, I think that there should be guilt proven before you push for resignations, although political parties are perfectly within their rights to push for resignation. Should they resign or not is a different matter altogether, Smriti brought up the issue of Mr. Modi, and I think that is an important issue to bring up. I think over there was a very systematic breakdown of what the government was meant to do, and he presided over that at a time where people died, where police were not functioning, where he was directly responsible as Home Minister and as Chief Minister for the law and order of the state, and 2,000 people were killed, So there is a moral responsibility. Also, he made many incendiary speeches. He said things that, added to that communal atmosphere. There were very empirical grounds on which people have held him morally culpable, although it may be impossible to prove his criminal culpability.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
No, I would like to, the very term hypocrisy that I was trying to elaborate on your segment tonight has been actually confirmed by Shoma's statement. That you will hold a man responsible without any evidence against him. You will hold a man in contempt without any evidence against him just because he belongs to the BJP. I would like to ask tonight why my question or concern about double standards has not been effectively answered on your panel. Secondly, there is a distinction that Shoma tried to make in the statement before, that there's a difference between policy and what Mr. Raja did. My concern is that when somebody changes policy to facilitate a crime, are you telling me that that policy maker should not be brought to justice?
But why can't the BJP wait for what the court has to say, since it's even in the Supreme Court? The issue is before the Supreme Court as well, Smriti. Why doesn't the BJP wait? Yes, let her answer. Let her answer. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you. Yeah.
Today we are asking that the Home Minister of the nation resign because in his capacity as Finance Minister, it seems he supported a crime. Now, this particular crime is being investigated by the CBI. Do you honestly feel that the CBI can have a fair investigation when the man they are supposed to investigate is the Home Minister of the nation?
Dr. Singhvi? That's really been the crux of the argument that the opposition has raised, that there can't be a fair probe if he continues to be in office.
Where is the crime? Who has said there is a crime prima facie?
If there is no crime, Dr. Singhvi,
crime? One second.
Why is A. Raja in jail?
An actionable crime? Of course, A. Raja being in jail, allegedly for taking bribes, doesn't mean that P. Chidambaram is guilty of a conspiracy to take bribes or has committed any crime. Now the point is, you may ultimately prove what is Mr. Swamy exercising himself about all this while. Obviously to get an order from a court. And we are discussing here as politicians that before Mr. Swamy gets that much desired order, Mr. Chidambaram should go. There is nothing which has changed from when Mr. Swamy started till when he ends. I have said earlier that I do not at all dispute his right to go flat out to get an order of some kind. But how can anybody, I am talking of the BJP now, merely for disrupting parliament, merely for clutching at straws, merely because they want to create a sensation and avoid an instability in the country, say that while the same proceeding which is going on is still going on without any order in Mr. Subramanian Swamy's favour, Mr. Chidambaram should resign. What has changed between last week, 2 months ago, 3 months ago?
No.
And one second more, Nidhi. As far as Gujarat is concerned, since my very good friend, and I really respect her view, Smriti ji, is talking about double standards, let me just add to the whole number of straws which must break that camel's back. Apart from all the factors Shoma has said, there is unprecedentedly the only state in independent India where not once, not twice, but over 3 times the Supreme Court has passed orders for en masse transfer of trials outside the state of Gujarat to other states. It has had an SIT by the Supreme Court. The SIT is examining even now the amicus curiae report. There is a huge amount of material, much more. If Mr. Chidambaram, if you apply Mr. Chidambaram's test, on which Dr. Swamy seeks his removal today, then Mr. Modi should have gone 6 times over by now.
Dr. Swamy?
Because there is nothing against Chidambaram.
Is there logic in that argument?
Let me intervene.
No, then you have to, I'll come back to you, Smriti, because then you have to, draw a standard. When should you ask for a minister to go?
If you give me as much time as you give Singhvi, I'll be able to answer. The thing is that, first of all, Parliament is an independent constitutional body. It has its own standards. Here is a person who is a cabinet minister for catching crooks in the country. That's the Home Minister. No, whatever one may say, there is sufficient documentation for the appreciation of parliamentarians to know that there is something. After all, today I have been asked to depose in the court. Itself means that the court has assessed my evidence and come to a conclusion that it is not a frivolous petition of mine, and therefore it requires some further consideration. So here is a person about whom now there is a suspicion. And that suspicion is about a person who is supposed to catch crooks, and if he is himself a crook, he should resign.
Okay, let me just get a couple of comments.
Just because I've been accused of hypocrisy, I just want to make my statements very clear, because as a journalist, all we can say is that we certainly want very strong statements to come from those we have elected into power, and I feel the government owes the country that. But again, because Smriti has said that I was being hypocritical about it, there is certainly, so far as far as Mr. Chidambaram is concerned, there are many things he seems to have been guilty of, or decision making that has been poor, that has not benefited the exchequer. But to club that with the act of corruption, I don't think there's any paper trail so far. As a journalist, and
there's no paper trail for Raja either as far as corruption, personal taking bribe is concerned.
No, but
it is criminal misconduct, which is 13(1)(d). Please read that.
Sure, but Mr. Swamy, as far as Mr. Raja is concerned, the first come first serve, the fact that he changed the dates, the fact that
but there is no trail that he took the money.
No, I'm saying in terms of the actions that he changed the date.
Yes, in Chidambaram was part and parcel of that.
Okay, one second.
Signature appears
there
everywhere.
There are a lot of questions from the audience. Yes.
I would like to ask Shoma ma'am one question. Is that when you talked about not looking at Narendra Modi and the crimes committed by A. Raja in different vein. Well, I think what Raja and probably Chidambaram have done is stolen the future of the present generation as well as the future generations as well, if in case they are proved to be guilty. So why doesn't Chidambaram, like the previous Congress leaders who set a precedent themselves, that if whenever there has been a claim against them, why don't they themselves take a seat back, resign, and let the investigation get completed, so that the whole common public of country feels that yes, a fair process has happened.
Go ahead.
Everybody is concerned about the fact that CBI, how will CBI probe when the Home Minister continues to be Chidambaram? Probe Chidambaram, that is number one. The second question is, with these two officers who are likely to come, how will they going to depose absolutely forthrightly when Chidambaram continues to be there without resigning?
Okay, yes sir.
We have been listening from the childhood that the democracy means the government of the people, by the people, for the people. But we are seeing here nowadays the government of the ministers, by the ministers, for the ministers. I don't see, there are so many cats and mouse fight we see in the, as far as corruption is concerned, like Anna's bill. And why Mr. Chidambaram is not indispensable, the government is not going to be collapsed with his resignation. I think he should give the resignation and see the government, if the Supreme Court give against him any decision, he can, and it can be in his favor also.
Okay,
it can be
my last question then is to Dr. Singhvi on this. That Dr. Singhvi, one of the points that someone in the audience raised is that, and which I said in the beginning as well, is that you've had a precedence where you've asked Shashi Tharoor to leave, you've asked Ashok Chavan to step down. Nothing was proved against these gentlemen when they were asked to resign. Why is then a different standard applied to Mr. Chidambaram?
I don't want to repeat what I've already said. Let me just make two quick points in the conclusion. One, this last point I just heard about CBI, I must remind you, and I'm only making that narrow point which was said earlier immediately a few seconds ago. The CBI in this case is Supreme Court monitored investigation. The Supreme Court monitored investigations includes in fact a specially appointed counsel, senior counsel is best for CBI. Nobody in his right mind can suggest that the Supreme Court directly monitoring the CBI in this case, the CBI is not independent. So this question about how they will prosecute or investigate, they have prosecuted, investigated from the top to the bottom, extremely powerful people. And if they have to do it, they are answerable to no one except the Supreme Court. That's point one. Point two, we are now discussing a demanded resignation by a complainant should Mr. Chidambaram go. The fact that Mr. Tharoor went for something else which he felt he ought to go for, something Mr. XYZ went for something he felt he should go for, purely moral on his own way, on his own thinking, does not mean that the rule in governance has changed, and thank God it hasn't changed, from being a rule where unless the court gives you some form of indictment, you should not go, to a rule which I just heard on your TV, that every time a complainant takes a pot shot at you, all ministers should fall like skittles, governance be damned, and this is the new rule of governance in this country.
Well, you may say those gentlemen went on their own accord,
common sense.
but we find that a little bit hard to believe. Okay, I'm going to ask you to stay on, Dr. Singhvi, because we have Subramanian Swamy with us, and I thought I would ask him about this since he's here, because the other news today has been that Harvard University has decided to remove courses taught by Mr. Swamy, saying that his views on Muslims in a recent controversial piece that he wrote, actually back in July, were reprehensible. Now, in that article, he had recommended demolishing mosques and suggested that only Muslims in India who acknowledge that their ancestors were Hindus should be allowed to vote. So, at a faculty meeting in Harvard, one of their professors, Diana Eck, proposed scrapping Dr. Swamy's courses, saying that his op-ed was something that clearly crossed the line by demonizing an entire religious community and calling for violence against their sacred places. Now, this is a time when we're in the middle of a huge debate on freedom of speech. Dr. Swamy, how do you feel about Harvard saying that your courses have to go?
Well, first of all, it was not the Department of Economics which nominates me every year and invites me every year, but it was a faculty where people who are not economists, who are India studies people like Diana Eck and Witzel and Sugata Bose, etc. I thought the most democratic thing for them to have done is to send their complaint to me and a copy of the article I wrote and ask me what my reaction is first. That is in law called audi alteram partem, which means that nobody should decide against anybody behind the back of that person, or at least eliciting his opinion. So that's one big surprise. Secondly, there's no complaint about my teaching at Harvard economics, because obviously I've taught for 50 years and every year Harvard calls me, my student rating is perhaps very high, that's why. This is not a question about my economics writings. This is about an article I wrote in India following the terrorist attack in Bombay. Now, I think this is a dangerous principle, that if Harvard begins to start making a teacher at Harvard accountable for what he has written elsewhere on another subject, then tomorrow Ms. Diana Ek or Vitsal, who have written pornographic stuff about Hindu religion in their writings, when they come to India, I can make them accountable.
But you realize that your article offended quite a lot of people.
Who? It did not offend people. I have seen polls, I have seen Twitters, I have seen Facebooks, I have seen letters to the editor. There is overwhelming support. And all the things that are quoted against me are total distortions. That's why I say, tell me what is it that I have said which you find objectionable, and I'll answer that.
Let me get Dr. Singhvi's views on this. Dr. Singhvi, how do you look at this particular controversy? Because right now we are in this debate where, you know, Kapil Sibal has talked about this whole thing with Facebook and Google. Do you think, but did you read Dr. Swamy's article at all? What did you think of it? If you did, do you think Harvard's done the right thing?
Okay, now let me just summarize my response in a series of points. See, first of all, I think we're jumping a lot of topics and connecting somewhat unrelated topics. It's a very vast subject you've raised, and I don't think I can answer it so quickly. Secondly, I have not read Dr. Swamy's article, but I have read extracts from it in some magazines and newspapers where it was published. Number three, it's really, I'm a stranger to this controversy because this is between Harvard and him. But I do very clearly believe, and I'm saying that very openly, that there is no concept of freedom in law, in practice, in society, in philosophy, in history, which is absolute. There's no such thing as absolute freedom at Harvard, absolute freedom in your home, absolute freedom on the street, absolute freedom anywhere. It's a very simple principle, Nidhi. Your freedom ends where my nose begins. Now, I'm not sure about the technicality of the debate because I'll have to, you know, read up and then argue on point by point.
No, sure. We're talking about a principle here.
Given the outrage, yeah, on the principle, the outrage on the very, very strong words and sentiments which is expressed there, it certainly, I think, comes in the way of several noses. Now, thereafter, I am not here to police Mr. Dr. Swamy, and nor do I think any of us here is going to make them change his view. So it's between Harvard, which is an autonomous institution, and Mr. Swamy's right now to sue Harvard if he thinks that his rights have been violated. But certainly, Harvard is an institution which everybody agrees would bend very, very much in favor of academic freedom. And if they are inclined to ban Mr. Swamy's works or any other way his activities, then you can take it that a very large zone of freedom has been exceeded and transgressed.
Shoma, before I come back.
I just wanted to say that the freedom of speech debate doesn't really come up here because Harvard has not tried to harm Mr. Swamy. You know, the way a lot of Hindu right-wing groups or a lot of Muslim right-wing groups, when they are upset by something that someone has written somewhere, they physically harm, they burn down, they threaten. I think that is a serious violation of freedom of speech. Here, an autonomous institution has said that this gentleman's views doesn't sit well with the core principles on which this institution has been built. And I don't think Mr. Swamy or any one of us can segregate what we feel politically from what we feel economically. We are integrated human beings, and what we write in India surely can be read in America and assessed for what it is, you know. So I think that's a specious argument. And to just say that there was Twitter support or Facebook support...
No, I didn't say that.
No,
I didn't say that. I was responding. I said they didn't even ask me what I wrote. They assumed, like you, that I must have written something terrible.
No, it's out in the public domain.
Where? Have you read it? You tell me what is that sentence that you find objectionable?
I think for Muslims to be asked to declare their Hindu ancestry or to even suggest that people must prove their citizenship before they are asked to vote.
That is a view that is not offensive to it because it happens to be the truth.
No, Mr. Swamy, you may feel that and you're within your rights to write that.
May I tell you, the Sufis, when they had their conference just now, they said 95% of the Muslims are of Hindu heritage, so this country is ours.
But are you going to do what Abhishek Singhvi suggested? Are you going to sue them if you think that your rights are...
Sue them for what? They invite me every year. Yeah. They wanted me to teach. I've taught for 50 years at Harvard. They didn't ask me. They decided to, some bunch of people who have nothing to do with economics come and use a majority and push me out. I have chosen to live in India. Why should I sue Harvard for not letting me come back to Harvard?
Okay, last word on this.
Yeah, I don't think the issue really is about whether he wants to sue them or not. I mean, the real point here is that He has been given the freedom to write what he feels,
Which he
and
has.
we are all within our rights to object to what he feels.
Provided
is
you
absolutely
object to
natural.
the things
And
after reading it.
No, as I said, we know.
You have not read it.
It's out in the public domain.
What do you mean by public domain? The obvious thing is to do is ask me,
Well,
did you write this?
Clearly you think that what you wrote was not offensive. There are others who don't agree with that, who think it was offensive. So let's agree to disagree on that. I have to take a break.
And there has been no violence here. I think we must make the distinction between those who oppose violently and those who disagree and say, we don't want you to be part of our universe.
My house was attacked by Congress people. I hope you know about that. Then what is that? What is that
We're
for?
talking about
you don't say about Hindu right-wing groups.
It
seems up. You have made the Hindus a target.
If anybody attacked your home, that's awful. I think
well,
some time back...
You didn't speak up at that time. Now you're speaking about the Hindu groups attacking people.
I said Muslim
what is that got to do with it?
Both.
I said both. And I think there were people who suggested, when Professor Lane and the Bhandarkar professors' faces were tarred, there was a response that we should tar the Sambhaji Brigade, and I said, no, we shouldn't, because we must live by our own sense of propriety.
Okay, I have to take a break. I have to thank Dr. Swamy because he has to leave at